Hey guys, Stealth here. Time for a deck review. This is my deck that I've been using so far. This is the Axis Tanks deck, also known as the 12 SS Panzer. You could argue that the fact that they use Hitler Jugend might not be the best. This is much more of a gameplay / political discussion that I don't really want to go into. I just consider it a Panzer Division, and that's it. So, the way that I have this Panzer Division set up is that it is initially intending to just capture terrain using infantry and a few cheap tanks and mostly anti-tank guns. I'm going to keep the view as it is for the moment, so you can at least get a bit of an understanding of what I'm going for and how I'm building this deck. Initially, I want to get reconnaissance in Phase A, so I have a couple of spade troops in Phase A. Then in Phase A, once I know where the enemy is, and of course these guys are going to be blended between the Panzer Grenadiers, I'm going to bring in the Panzer Grenadiers with the occasional Panzer Grenadier Führer, which means Panzer Grenadier Leader, so this is one of those command groups, which will boost morale. I have 8 of these guys and then 3 of these. One of the most important elements of my Phase A strategy is the Beute Firefly and the Befehl Panzer II-C. I may need to reconsider this one, but it is really the only tank that you can get. The Germans in Phase A are just not that good where it comes down to armor. That's just not what this deck seems to revolve around. So you can get another one of these, but you'd have to give up something down there along the line. So Phase A, mostly infantry, a couple of support units from the tanks, so the Befehl Panzer II-C and the Beute Firefly. I also have one of these. One card of the SDKFZ 250/9. These are very nice suppressive fire units. They have an autocannon, they have 6 accuracy, which on a scale of 10 is pretty damn accurate for a unit from this era. Off-road speed at 35 is actually quite good for these types of units. And the one issue that I found with them is that they tend to run out of ammo pretty quickly. They carry 100 rounds of AP ammo and 100 rounds of HE ammo. The role that I'm using them for is to suppress using the HE ammo. And yes, of course, you do have the 7.92mm gun, the MG34. It does have a lot more rounds, 1500. Its range is less though. So that is something that you will need to keep into account, otherwise you might find yourself suppressing the enemy and suddenly finding that your suppression is a bit lacking. Because you might be thinking, well, I'm suppressing them with 8 HE at a range of 800, and all of a sudden it goes out of ammo. To make sure that that doesn't happen, I also have a couple of these Opel Blitzes. These are resupply vehicles, to make sure that these guys can keep firing. Now I have found that these guys tend to die rather quickly. So one change I am going to be making to this deck right now is to take out the Flampanzer, because while these are nice, they only have a very short range for the napalm thrower. It's only 260 meters, which, yes, against infantry will be alright, but in Phase B you're going to be finding a bit more along the lines of tanks or anti-tank guns. So I'm going to take out this one and I'm going to add another card of these. Now there is another variant of this vehicle that you can get. That is the 250/8. You can see them here side by side. This one has a 75mm gun, which fires at 6 rounds a minute, has more HE, but it doesn't suppress as much, in the sense that it doesn't have that high rate of fire that the 20mm gun does. So since I already have other units which can provide larger HE boosts or larger damages, this is the one that I have picked, the 250/9. I'm also going to be defending the areas that I have, and since I don't have a lot of anti-tank or a lot of tanks in Phase A for standoff, I decided to pick a couple of Pak 38 50mm guns. These are static anti-tank guns, and yes, you can move them around at 5 kph, so don't expect these to get anywhere quickly. In Phase B, You can also get the Pak 40 75mm gun, which, if you compare it, is going to give you quite a bit more AP, a little bit more accuracy, and the same amount of range, but they also have the benefit of firing HE rounds. So these guys can, in fact, do quite a bit against infantry. The deck, as I have it set up, uses the Panzerschreck. This is the only infantry unit in this deck that can actually do anything against armor. It has a range of 250 meters. It is very, very accurate. But then again, at 250 meters, most of these things will hit. Although 250 meters, that's pretty much down the street, and you're still going to be able to hit it. So for that era, I think that's pretty accurate. The problem that I found is, again, this range. I tried using these in a video that I have uploaded previously. And while they probably will be able to kill pretty much any amount of armor that they're looking at, you need to get so close to the vehicle that the vehicle, if it's not going to have a line of sight blocked by trees or buildings, is going to see you coming. And a tank is not, unfortunately, just going to happily sit there and wait for you to kill it. So this one I'm going to change slightly. I'm going to take out the Panzerschrecks. They're a bit of an experiment, and as you can see, I can go for Phase C mostly, which is where I might need some more AT guns for the Pak 40, or the Phase B Jagdpanzer IV. Now if you compare the Jagdpanzer IV to what else I can bring in Phase B, which would be, for example, the Panzer IV-H, you can see that the Jagdpanzer IV is quite a bit more expensive, and this is not so much in the gun. It carries a 75mm gun, carries a few HE rounds, 35 AP rounds, as it is mostly a tank killer. AP is slightly less than what you're getting on the Panzer IV-H, but what it does have is a lot of frontal armor. 14 points of frontal armor, which means that in Phase B, these things can be pretty much invulnerable. I'm not going to be bringing them in my deck though, because it just doesn't rhyme with the deck philosophy that I have. So what I want to bring in is the Pak 40. That's going to be in Phase B. Anyway, to wrap up Phase A, I don't expect to get a lot of AA or a lot of aircraft against me in Phase A, so the only AA gun that I have is the Flak 38 20mm gun. This thing is there not sheerly in an AA capacity role, but can also be used very effectively against infantry. They have a very good range, better than what you have on most of your vehicles in Phase A. So I'm going to be using this as a suppressive vehicle. Then we're moving on to Phase B. In Phase B I'm getting 115 points per minute. Phase B is where I want to start pushing. So the units in Phase B are more mobile or geared towards holding on to what I have and reinforcing those positions. So I have the SPW 231. This one is nice and fast, 28 kilometers off-road, which is a massive improvement over the Spade Trooper that I have. They have a 20mm gun, which can fire HE rounds, carries 150 of those, carries 150 AP rounds. AP ammunition only penetrates 4 points of armor, so it is not going to kill a tank unless you manage to flank it. But I consider these guys supports and optics for the tanks, because they have high optics. On the armor front, they are pretty easily taken out by pretty much anything. They don't have any armor to speak of. 2 on the rear, 2 on the side, 3 on the front. Any AT gun's gonna come laughing once they see this thing, but it won't be alone. That's the main theory. It will not be alone. It will be escorted by, for example, Command Panzer IV, Panzer IV-H, or if I have enough points, the Panther D. If my reconnaissance vehicle, the 231, can spot for these units, then that is all that it needs to do. Because these guns can reach out and touch you at a significant range, and where the reconnaissance vehicle may only deliver a punch of 4 or 8 HE, the Panther D has a range at 1200 meters and does 18 damage. And yes, its HE is still not that good, which actually I think is a bit curious. because this is a 75mm gun and has 4 HE, and this is a 20mm gun but has far better HE values. So you can see that this vehicle seems to be much more developed around killing off enemy infantry or suppressing their transports. Also in Phase B, as to reinforce the Panzer Grenadiers that have taken up positions, I have the MG42. These guys carry a lot of rounds, 5,000 rounds. They have a range of 600 meters, and they're there to reinforce the Panzer Grenadiers in positions where they might get attacked over the field by infantry. These will suppress the enemy infantry, keeping them at bay while I maneuver one of my support vehicles or a tank into position to finally wrap up the infantry. I also have a Pioneerführer over there. These guys carry the satchel charge or the Nebelhandgranate. Actually, that is not a satchel charge. They have a high explosive value of none. I'm not exactly sure what these guys are for, to be honest, as I haven't used them yet. But they are a command group, so they're there to boost morale for the infantry, in case that the Panzer Grenadier Führers somehow died. Phase B will also see a bit more infantry, that is on the enemy team. Most of it is going to be suppressed by my tanks. I also, from Phase A, might still have the Beute Cromwell, which is a captured Cromwell and now has a 95mm gun, does 12 HE, and this thing is really going to put the hurt on the enemy infantry. Phase B, I'm also getting worried about aircraft. So I have a few aircraft of my own. This is the Bf-109. This one is mostly an air superiority fighter, but keep in mind that in this game strafing with this aircraft can also really hurt enemy infantry. Far more valuable and far more valid than what you might be expecting from Wargame Red Dragon. I also have the Focke-Wulf 190. This one is armed with 500 kilogram bombs to hit enemy infantry group concentrations. So if I find there's any stronghold, I might be able to get them out of the way with the bombers. If that doesn't really work, I have 4 Wespe standing by. Note that this deck does not get any mortar infantry. You don't get any cheap mortars. The cheapest one that you can get is basically the Wespe. Because this one, or actually sorry, this one can also provide smoke, if that's what you want. It also has the Panzerwerfer, which is, I believe, a napalm unit. It fires 150mm rockets at 1600 meters. I haven't tried them yet, but I believe I have been on the receiving end of one of these things at some point. And I can tell you that wasn't pretty. These things can really quickly get rid of enemy infantry groups. In Phase C, you can get, well, let's say the bigger brother of that thing. This one carries 280mm rockets. This is the Wolframen 40. This one does 7 HE, also napalm, which I believe is that little thing on the side of the 7. 1300 meter range and 112 meters area of effect. I currently don't use them because I don't think that napalm really fits the way that I'm building this deck at the moment. That's why I have the Hummel for Phase C. And for Phase C you can also, if you really want to, bring in this Observer. This is a tank worth 190 points. It is not just a Panzer IV-H. This thing can also call in off-site artillery support. You can see that it carries, or it can bring in, the field battery 173mm, doing 18 HE, 45 rounds of ammunition, and it has a pretty significant area of effect. Now, it may say that range is invalid, or how do you put that? It has unlimited range, but that's not actually true. The range is indicative of where your unit is. So it's not like you keep this thing at the back of your lines and kill something on the other side of the map. It's an artillery observer. It needs to have line of sight. If it doesn't, it will not be able to call in the artillery strike. That might be another interesting unit that I might bring in later. For now I found the Wespe and the Hummel to be nice. Anyway, in Phase B, as mentioned, I'm getting more worried about aircraft, so I also have the Flak 36, which is a slightly different unit to the Flak 38, as the Flak 36 37mm has a larger caliber, which also means better range and better HE values. This thing has a range of 1600 meters with 21 HE, carries far fewer HE rounds of course, and of course can be still used in the role of countering enemy infantry. So don't consider AA guns to be sheerly AA guns, because they can also be really nice at keeping the enemy infantry at bay. And then we come to Phase C. And Phase C is where this deck is going to start really pushing. Phase C is where I have a few more of those reconnaissance vehicles, and I also have the bigger brother of the reconnaissance vehicle. This is the SPW-233 with a 75mm gun. This one comes with very high optics, or very good optics, as opposed to high optics, so it's able to spot far better. Armor values are still the same, and in fact it even has one less rear armor than the 231. It has a better range, it has better AP values, and it has similar HE values, at of course a lower rate of fire, because this one carries the 75mm gun, which just takes longer to rearm. I don't have any further infantry in Phase C. You can go for more infantry, but they are not added in Phase C. You can just add a few cards. For the tanks, I got the Panther Gs. There we go, the game just loaded the textures. These are really, really dangerous tanks. 18 points of AP, 50 rounds, really accurate, 7 points of accuracy out of 10. They carry 25 HE rounds, they have a range of 1200, and what I found to be the biggest thing about these is that accuracy, combined with a high punch gun. If this thing fires at you, it's not that likely to miss its first shot, but more often than not, its first shot will not be perfect. It then retargets, fires again, and at that stage you are really going to take damage. And these guys have a very good chance of then knocking out your tank, because they will cut through your armor. Their weakness is that their 13mm of frontal armor is going to be penetrated by anti-tank guns. So if you ever find yourself coming up against a Panther G, bring an anti-tank gun. Just make sure that you try to find the Panther G first before it finds you. Because if it finds your anti-tank gun, then your anti-tank gun is going to have issues. Or you need to find the way to keep the Panther G distracted. Keep it suppressed with infantry, keep it suppressed with artillery, not infantry. Keep it suppressed with artillery, make sure it takes, for example, an HE salvo from a plane that's going to stun it, then bring your AT gun into position and knock it out. These tanks are fantastic. I have 6 of them. I have 4 standard values and 2 veterans. Also in Phase C, I have the Guerrilla. Now this is not to be confused with the artillery Guerrilla, which is with the Vesper and the Hummel. If you're coming from World of Tanks, you might think that the Guerrilla is also an artillery gun. It's not really an artillery gun in this game, as it is there to deliver a very high anti-infantry punch. 25 points of HE over a range of 1000 meters means that, yes, you will be in range of enemy tanks. So don't send this thing forward unescorted, hoping that it will survive, because you might come back surprised that this thing dies very quickly. But if you have an enemy strong position with a lot of infantry, bring in one of these and have it just hammer away at the enemy infantry. And you're going to find that your problem disappears rather quickly. Further units in Phase C that you haven't seen yet is the Available Wind. This is an AA gun. It's not terribly mobile, but it does fire very, very quickly. 695 rounds a minute, 4,000 rounds of ammo, so you don't need to worry about this thing going out of ammo anytime soon. 800 meter range, which is significant and enough to go against most aircraft. And these guys are mobile, so if you are pushing, then these guys can keep up. As opposed to this one, the Flak 41 88mm. This one has better range, delivers a 4 HE explosive value, which I still don't really understand, because I know that the 88mm was originally an AA gun, later pretty much turned into an AT gun. That's why it has 16 points of AP, but it sits under NTR, so this gun can do both. The thing I don't understand is its low HE value. It just says 4. Compare that to this one, the Flak 36. This one has 37mm, so less than half, but its HE value is 21. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're going to change this at some point. I'm not exactly sure what they are thinking along these lines, what their strategy is. It might be that this thing just doesn't have enough HE yet, or that they want you to use it as an AT gun. As an AT gun, it is going to be very effective. It has very good accuracy and very good AP. It is just not going to be capable of getting out of trouble very quickly, because at 3 kph, this thing is slower than infantry walking. You need to keep an eye on this thing. It's a pretty big investment at 135 points, so make sure that you keep this thing out of harm's way, unless you want to see it destroyed. As for positioning, make sure that this thing has a wide field of fire, a wide field of vision. Because if you park this thing in a tree line overlooking a field, any tank will have to think twice before coming anywhere close to that field. The problem, of course, if they know where this gun is and they do return fire with artillery or an airstrike, you are going to have a bit of an issue. It is not very survivable. It is not very mobile. It does have 10 strength going for it, but it carries no armor whatsoever. So keep in mind that while it is a very good gun emplacement, that's pretty much what I consider it to be. An emplacement. It is not an assault gun, it is not a storm gun, it is not there to keep pushing. Also in phase C is the Hummel. The Hummel compared to the Vespa does more damage. 25 HE versus 14. I wouldn't recommend putting the Hummel on smoke duty because it only carries 4 rounds. These guys are pure damage dealers. And their speed is the same as the Vespa, but they just hit a lot harder for only 30 points more. And of course you can only bring these in phase C. As for further phase C units, I have the Junkers 88S. Drops 2 500 kilogram bombs, and this is another one of those answers to a lot of infantry units, or for example to stunning tanks, because that is something else that this thing seems to be doing rather well. Making sure that you can deliver a very high punch to an enemy tank. Yes, you might not kill it, but it will be out of action for a while because it's going to be stunned, it's going to be panicked, it's going to be retreating. And a retreating unit is not likely to fire back at you. So that's, for example, when you roll forward, albeit slowly, your Flak 41 and then punch in, well, an 88mm size hole in the enemy tank. That's the theory of this deck. I have one gameplay video of it up already, so you can see how I used it. The deck that you see there is the old version of this deck, as it were. So that one still has, for example, the Flampanzer under the support units. And I believe I changed something else there as well. I really like this deck. This deck, I feel, is more suitable along the lines of the armored playstyle than the US armor deck. The other armor deck that we have so far in the open beta. It's just, I don't know, it feels more to my liking. I can make this thing work, whereas I cannot really make the US deck work. One thing to keep in mind, while these German vehicles are very nice and very powerful, they can get overwhelmed and they are really, really expensive. A Panther G is going to set you back 280 points, which for an endgame unit you might say, well, that's little over 2 minutes saving, so perfectly possible, and even less time if you're doing destruction and you have a good portion of the map. Yes, but they are not invulnerable. 13 points of frontal armor, you can see it indicated here, is nice, but it will not defend you against any gun. as I have noticed when I was playing against the British Airborne. They brought in, I believe, a 17-pounder gun and knocked these things out very, very quickly. So make sure that you don't send these guys forward unescorted. Now this is one of the potential deck builds that you can go for in an armored deck. You can go any way with this one. Mine is set up around an easy phase A, so not pushing too much. Phase B I get more aggressive, and phase C is when I really start to steamroll. If you want to stop this deck from doing so, make sure that you try to knock out as many vehicles or as much terrain of it as possible in phase A. That's where this deck just does not have a lot of punch. The moment that you let this thing get to phase B, and the moment that those Panzer IVs get into position, you're going to start hurting. So if you find yourself going up against a deck like this, try to have as many AT guns in your deck. Just spread them out and make sure that those Panthers and those Panzer IVs don't have anywhere to go, and you should be fine. Anyway, let me know what you think of the deck down below in the comments. If you want to use it and try it out for yourself, the deck code has the description has the deck code, so just import that into your own game, and let me know what your thoughts are and how you can make this deck work for you. If you have any improvements or any thoughts on it, I'd like to see those in the comments. And as for gameplay, there's a link in the description to the other video that I posted today, which also shows you how to use this deck, or how I have been using this deck, which by no means is the only way to use this deck. I made a couple of massive mistakes there, but at least you can see the way that this deck plays out, or can play out. Anyway, with that, it's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you soon for more videos.